It is still Thursday, May 7th. This is still the Ways and Means Committee room. And it is 10:20. We are picking up S214. We have Beth St. James with us to tell us about the bill.
Good morning, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. Would you like me to share my screen?
Yes, please.
So you have S214 is passed by the Senate because the Education Committee made no changes. They concurred with what the Senate passed out. So S214 is an amendment to Section 829, which is the pre-kindergarten statute. These asterisks represent all of current law. We are not making any changes to that. We are adding a new subsection to be subsection I at the very bottom of the statute, which reads, notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, the NEK choice school district may provide pre-kindergarten education to eligible pre-K students by paying tuition pursuant to this section to one or more pre-K programs operated by a public school in New Hampshire that is located in a school district within 25 miles of the Vermont border. The Essex North Supervisory Union shall be responsible for administering enrollment procedures and managing pre-K portion payments pursuant to this section and state board rules. The superintendent may apply for and receive a waiver from the Agency of Education and Agency of Human Services of any rule provision that is impractical for the NEK choice school district or the New Hampshire program by demonstrating that a substantially equivalent provision is offered. This change would take effect on July 1, 2026.
Can you just say some more words about that last sentence, substantially equal provision being offered?
Yes, if you will indulge me, I can take no credit for this language. This language came to the Senate and the Senate adopted it from collaboration between the Agency of Education, DCF, and the school district in question. The issue is that most, if not all, of the kiddos in the NEK choice school district would be getting their K through 12 education in New Hampshire public school. Our K through 12 tuition system is separate from our pre-K tuition system. In order for public funds out of the ed fund to go towards pre-K, they can only go to a pre-qualified provider, either public or private. Pre-qualification requires you to meet certain things, including having Vermont licensed teachers or following Vermont early learning standards. I'm going to guess that the New Hampshire public schools are not following Vermont early learning standards or teaching with Vermont licensed teachers in all classrooms. So I believe that the last lines 15 through 19 are meant to get at the fact that the statute says money only goes to pre-qualified providers. Now we're saying it can go to public schools in New Hampshire. We want to make sure that there's some amount of substantially equal education being provided. So the agencies are going to work with the district to make sure that there's a substantially equivalent provision, for example, a New Hampshire licensed teacher or New Hampshire early learning standards, whatever they call them. But that would be managed at the local level rather than spelled out statute as to, what hoops they need to jump through.
So like the district through the superintendent will talk to the AOE and the Agency of Human Services and say, this is what this school's standards are.
Yep.
So the only way I can figure out which school districts would be likely to be impacted would be to look at where they currently send their elementary kids, and the overwhelming majority of their students are actually in Vermont schools. And of the kids who go out of state, half of them are in independent schools, including two that are no longer eligible to accept students. So I'm assuming that the majority of them would go to the public schools that are currently serving kids. It's only about 20 kids in that K-6 age group that are in New Hampshire right now. And so I looked at the public schools they go to. One of them has a virtual pre-kindergarten program. Would this apply to that virtual pre-kindergarten program?
I don't know that I can answer that question. I don't know anything about whether it's part of a public school or whether it would be substantially equivalent provisions offered in the discretion of AOE and DCF.
So it is a public school program. And so then the other public school programs, two of them are just a couple miles from Canaan. So my question was the decision to go out of state and drive past Canaan on the way to the public pre-Ks across the border there, was that because Canaan is at capacity and can't accommodate those kids?
Representative Quimby is joining us, so she can answer questions about the committee's intent, which are, that's purview.
She's on the way.
Thanks. Any questions for Beth? Yes.
Yeah, the line 15, 16, whatever, may have basically run, not be system, Senate. Apply for a waiver for any rule, that seems awfully broad. I mean, maybe that's a policy question but I'm just voicing for the committee that seems awfully broad.
Yes, and the House Education Committee passed this, as did the Senate Education. Yes.
Only question is on tuition. Is it just limited to regular tuition payments that would be sent out from public schools?
Act 166 funds, so the 10 hours.
The 10 hours, okay, yeah, thanks.
Any other questions for Beth? Thanks, Beth.
All right, good morning, everyone. Ezra Holden, Joint Fiscal Office. Would you like me to share my screen?
Yes.
All right, so S214, as you all just heard from Beth, this bill would allow the NEK Choice School District to pay tuition to a public school in New Hampshire for eligible pre-K students. So Joint Fiscal Office is estimating that this bill would increase education fund expenditures beginning in fiscal year 2028. The reason being that most districts, including NEK Choice, have already passed their budget for fiscal year 2027. So if there were new expenditures in fiscal year 2027, they would need to use their already approved budget to shoulder those expenditures, and then their fiscal year 2028 budget could be increased to account for any additional expenditures. We're estimating that up to 14 students would gain access to UPK through this bill, and that is from the field, and I believe that's 7 students who are ages 4 and 7 students who are ages 3. So that's from the field, and based on the Act 166 tuition rate, that would be about $60,000 in additional expenditures to the education fund, which we consider de minimis in the light of the 2 billion or so plus in the education fund.
Isn't it also possible that that district would keep their budget the same and change something else to accommodate this cost?
Sure, that would be a district level decision there. So it's a range of 0 to 60,000, I would say, because 0 to 14 kids could choose to participate and go to New Hampshire.
Somehow you arrived at 14 and 0 to 14, and is that estimate the total number of 3 and 4-year-olds? And so is it inclusive of the kids who are already enrolled in Kingdom East and Canaan, or is it in addition to those kids who are currently enrolled?
Sure, so that's a good question. I spoke with some individuals from the NEK Choice School District as well as some folks from DCF, and they provided this estimate of up to 14 students who do not have access to pre-K now would gain pre-K access if they could go to New Hampshire. Like I said, I believe that's 7 4-year-olds and 7 3-year-olds. However, to your point, it could be as low as 0 because if the parent or guardian does not wish to enroll their student or they can't find a slot in New Hampshire, then those kids may not actually go to New Hampshire. But these are considered up to 14 new students who do not currently attend pre-K. It's my understanding.
Did you take testimony also from, or did you talk to the superintendents in Essex North and Kingdom East, which currently enroll pre-K students from Kingdom Choice, to understand the potential impact of this on their pre-Ks that they're currently operating?
No, I did not speak with any superintendents.
Any other questions for Ezra? Thanks, Ezra. Hi, Beth. Representative Quimby, excuse me. Welcome to Ways and Means. Would you like to come join us in the chair?
You already done all that?
We already did all that. We're a little, I know, we,
We're fast.
things felt like they were going,
Came earlier and I'm like, well,
things were going slow this morning and then they were going fast. We got really
That time of
deep
year.
into the water system and then we just came back out again. So I think, thank you for joining us. I know the vote out of your committee was 10-0-1, but happy to hear any backgrounds, and I think Representative Holcomb at least has a question or two.
okay, so yeah, the bill came over from the Senate. And we just concurred with that. I don't know if there's things for me to say that have not already been answered by the people you've spoken to, but yeah, there are some, Essex County has like the lowest percentage in this state of eligible pre-K students accessing pre-K. And Vermont's, at the forefront of pre-K education nationally, but not in Essex County. There is a couple of Head Start programs. I think one's in Island Pond and one in Gilman, if I remember correctly. So families in Essex County in the NEK Choice District that live close to Canaan that has a public school pre-K, or close to Island Pond that has the Head Start, or close to Gilman that have a Head Start, they have a place they can access. But it's a pretty vast geographic region with no public schools of any kind. And so there are families who live really closer to the New Hampshire border, perhaps in Guildhall, who it's the most convenient option for them and has been for them to send their children to Lancaster, for example, because it's 10 minutes away. They might work in the area. They're already taking their older children to Lancaster. So having the option now for their 3 or 4-year-old to be in the car with them and go to Lancaster as well is going to allow them to have access they just haven't had. And also, the poverty level, these are people who don't have transportation or, they can't drive to Island Pond and drop off their 3-year-old and then drive an hour the other way. So they just don't send them. And there are people who aren't working because they have to be home because they cannot conveniently have their younger child somewhere. The superintendent from Essex, I'm going to say it wrong. That's the school district name. Anyway, she said it's 5 kids. She said, I don't know where the number 14 is coming from. I'm thinking it's more like 5 kids. Again, hard to know because there's so many who have not been taking advantage of it.
And either way, the impact to the ed fund is somewhere between 0 and de minimis.
Yes, and either way. And so how many will take advantage of this? Not sure. I think it's the families who, like I said, mostly who are already sending their older children to that school anyway. That it would make sense for their 3 or 4-year-old to go there and then continue through that system.
So Beth, I'm thinking some of this fiscal impact, which is our purview,
Yes.
might be offset if some of these 3-year-olds are triple E. And maybe not, that's not our decision, but maybe triple E kids.
I'm not sure how that's going to work because it is a tuitioning model as opposed to how we fund pre-K in Vermont, which is a little different. And I think they, fiscal, people could talk more about or Senate Finance, why it worked that way. But having to make it a tuition model as opposed to how we fund here, I'm not sure, but I think the offset would be there because they're getting tuition, but you're not getting the payment the other way. So it kind of balances, it doesn't exactly balance out equally, but it's de minimis when that happens. And I did ask the biggest question I had is why, if in Vermont, can you access either a pre-qualified private provider or a public school, why did we not do that for this option as well? It's just really overcomplicates things. In Act 73, there's no more out-of-state tuition allowed to non-public schools. So we can only make tuition payments to public schools in New Hampshire now. We can't make tuition payments to an approved independent school. So not adding that extra layer. And also the testimony they had is that they have capacity. The public schools in New Hampshire have the capacity that's needed to take in 3 and 4-year-olds.
I was looking, so I looked at the public schools out of
Yes.
state because the only kids plan past going to Mount Laurel Academy and they're not going to be taking tuition anymore.
Right.
So I looked at the public school and you're looking at Colebrook,
Yes.
Cumberland, Stratford,
Yeah.
and White Mountains. White Mountain Regional says we don't have capacity.
Right.
So we're not taking kids.
Right.
Colebrook is 2 to 4 miles from Canaan, which I believe has a. public-
Canaan does have a public.
So we don't really need Colebrook. And then Northumberland and Stratford, it's a virtual program. Is that a substantively equal program when kids are doing a virtual pre-K?
I don't know if it's a substantively equal program. I don't know if I know the answer to that. But, and that's the other thing was the third provision is to apply for the waiver. And in section 1, there are basically 3 parts. And the third part is that they could apply for a waiver if it's substantially equal. And we said, well, what are you talking about? And the biggest issue there is, in Vermont, you're required to have a Vermont licensed early educator, early special educator on staff. You must follow the Vermont early education quality standards. Well, if you're in New Hampshire, those 2 things don't make sense because you're not in Vermont. So, it would have to be a licensed New Hampshire teacher or a New Hampshire early education standards. So it'd have to be substantially equal, but it wouldn't be the exact requirement because you're not in Vermont.
I think I remember hearing that in the Northeast Kingdom, there were a number of private providers as well that were kind of supplementing, but in this particular area, there are. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Or the distance to them is so much further in the exact opposite direction that you're traveling with your other children or you're traveling to work, that their parents are not taking advantage.
Right.
And again, the number 14 seems very high to me from what I've heard.
Let's hope we get that many kids.
Well, we heard some testimony about.
Great Fiscal did their research before they.
Yeah.
Before us.
And we've heard now that the numbers are increasing. I mean, Guildhall closed their school, I think it was because they had 8 kids and now there's twice as many kids living in Guildhall. And East Haven closed their school and now there's twice as many kids living in East Haven because they now have school choice. So families have moved into those areas that were not there 10 years ago. Schools closed.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Oh,
yeah, Representative Humphrey.
Question, lines 16 through 19.
Oh, and I didn't bring it with. I do have it in my bag over there.
It's easy peasy.
Okay.
The superintendent may apply for and receive a waiver from the agency or any.
Thank you, mine's in my bag.
Any rule provisions.
Yeah, so the biggest 2 that were referenced was the requirement to be a Vermont licensed teacher.
Yeah.
Well, if you're in New Hampshire, they may not hold a Vermont license, they may hold a New Hampshire license.
Yeah.
And the Vermont early education quality standards that must be followed. Again, you're in New Hampshire, so you're not following the Vermont ones. Is there a substantially equal one that New Hampshire
So
has?
basically, the committee reviewed this stuff and was content that everything's okay, or close enough.
We were in this, this has been, I was told, like 5 years of advocacy from this area to have this happen.
Okay.
There's just there's so few students in Essex County that qualify, that 3 and 4-year-olds that are not accessing pre-K.
Okay.
That could be, it's the smallest percentage in the state. So this change that would allow or potentially allow these 3 and 4-year-olds to access pre-K to set them up for success and to set up their families to be able to be in the workforce for more hours.
Sure.
I think for a de minimis impact, I think it's definitely worth moving forward.
Helpful answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So So folks, lots of big questions about pre-K in Vermont that we are going to continue wrestling with over the next couple of years. But in the meantime, we have this bill before us, passed House Education unanimously and with a very de minimis fiscal impact. And so I would love if someone could move a vote on it unless someone needs to hear some more testimony. Yes, Representative Maslin.
I could move that we vote out S 214 favorably as we received.
Thank you. Representative Maslin moves that we find S 214 favorable. Is there any discussion? Yes.
When they did close the school there, the next year population doubled. And that's because when you close your school, you pick up the cost of the kids whose parents are overpaying their tuition. And so you are going to get that effect. My concern is that the state of Vermont, our constitutional commitment is to making sure every child has a school unless we provide another way to do that. And I understand people think this is the other way to do that. We appear to, I mean, pre-K isn't even required in New Hampshire. Kindergarten isn't even required in New Hampshire. We don't know what the standards are in the virtual program, which is the one close to these children and maybe the one they pick up. I worry that I know it's a very small number of kids. I understand it has a de minimis impact on the ed fund, but I'm always worried when we approve a lower standard for some kids. And I just am very worried that this is a very ambiguous piece of legislation and it's not okay. And I know on the other side, the state, I called the superintendent in Granville High School and asked who was going to Granville. 41% of the kids that Vermont tuitions to Granville High School are on IEPs. So we are pushing the kids who need the best education out of the state and we are not taking care of them. And we make the biggest difference for those kids when we provide access to good, high quality pre-kindergarten education. So I feel like this region and this bill is a metaphor for what we're going to look like, particularly in the southern tier of the other state, if we just think of education as tuition and we don't take responsibility for making sure we're providing good access to education for every kid, especially the ones who most need our help. So I just have I'm disappointed in us. I think we have low expectations for some kids.
So, Representative Holcomb, do you have any idea how Granville handles the IEPs?
Well, the IEPs are handled consistent with federal law. To the extent that we lose federal support for special ed, but no one, the local districts can't even tell me how many kids, I mean, schools in a month, but I still don't know how many kids from the Vermont districts are economically disadvantaged or have IEPs. We're just not tracking this. We're not paying attention to these kids. And that bothers me because these are the kids who, if we invest early and well, it will make the biggest difference for them. And by the way, this Kingdom choice is a little bit lower economic disadvantage than the state on average, and much lower than Canaan and Kingdom East, which are its surrounding districts. So this is a slightly more privilege. I know there are disadvantaged kids there, but it is more privileged than the two districts that surround it that operate public programs.
You want to say anything?
And just to be clear, we have declined for multiple years to talk about contracting as an option. And, even Milton Friedman, who is the granddaddy of vouchers, said you can't have competition create quality and access in rural areas because there just are no kids. And if we keep eroding scale and keep sending our money out of state, we're seeing this on the southern border too, there just won't be options for the kids who depend on public schools to provide access. So I just am mindful that that's something we're not paying attention to.
I also want to see us pay better attention to all that, but I look at how we are serving those children now, today, and how we will be serving them after we pass this bill. And it's an improvement. So why would we not do that? We want them to be better off. And a lot of the decision still belongs to the parents. So maybe the parent can't drive them or something still might be the problem, but for our role, how we can make it better, it seems like this is the best option. Or am I not seeing something?
My point is, I don't know. I mean, I went back through all the testimony that was provided in the Senate and the House on this bill, and we actually got very little testimony. We just got a school board member who came in and the agency and DCF. I have to trust they're paying attention. If the kid's eligible for triple E, the district might even provide transportation. It's possible the kids enrolled in Canaan and King Denise are children who are on IEPs who are eligible for those early services and are being transported by the district and being paid for. My fear is so often we take the easiest solution and then we think we're one and done, and we don't make sure that we're actually taking care of kids. And just too systematically, I see who is hurt when we don't pay attention. And I don't want us to think, I mean, I still feel that we are not different from the rest of the country. And there's so much research now on who tuition benefits and who doesn't benefit. And you have to build your system with attention to the people who, as Rep. Quimby said, have parents who can't drive them. And if our solution is to give those kids virtual pre-K, I don't think, first of all, that meets our constitutional test. And I also don't think we're doing the right thing by those kids. So if we pass this and we say, we're awesome, take a voucher and I hope you can drive there, we failed those kids because we haven't addressed the core challenge of access.
Anything further from anyone?
Um,
Representative Higley.
Yeah, sorry, wrong hand. Go ahead.
So Representative Holcomb, I guess, what's your alternative? Just, I mean,
It's the same thing I've been saying for 3 years. We need to look at contracting. If you say to this district, you can create a program and you can issue contracts. One of the reasons in my area, some of the private providers struggle is because the enrollments are so irregular. So they have 3 kids 1 year, 5 kids another. But if a district could say, hey, we're going to work with you and our kids are going to come to you, then that provider could take a risk. They could expand their program. They could hire the teacher. And it's the same thing. I know there was a long conversation with the Head Start in the region. I mean, these people are trying, but the economics just aren't there. But if that Head Start knew that it was going to consistently have 10 kids, then they could hire and have a stable program. But as a business operator or as a Head Start program, if you can't guarantee that you're going to have some stability, you can't take that business risk.
that still doesn't solve the distance issue.
Well, there are options and it's never, that's why busing, I mean, it's funny in some places. The reason I brought up Granville is we provide busing to the New York schools. We just don't provide busing to the Vermont schools, which are all independent schools. So we make choices all the time. And the accumulation of our choices is often very unfair. And so what you start with is those kids who don't have access. And you say, okay, what is keeping this kid from getting access? And you don't just trust that the market is going to find it because we know who markets underserve. It's the same kids. And these kids get taught them. And those are the kids. And I'm not saying it's public or private, but you got to make sure that you are committed. We have publicly funded pre-kindergartens. How do we design a system that makes sure they get it? And just saying to a parent, it's up to you. I mean, I've talked to super principals who gave parents money to get their car fixed because they broke down the car and they couldn't get to school. Like there are families like that who are really struggling. If you are providing transportation, you're deciding who can live in your community, truly, if they have kids and want access to education. And those are choices that we are making as a state. And the cumulative effect of them is to harm the same kids and the same families over and over again.
Representative Maslin, did you still want to add something?
Well, no, I'm fine.
Okay.
I appreciate the comments very much, but I also think for the moment, I have to agree with Representative Brannigan because I can't remember what your words were, Representative Brannigan, but we need to look at how the kids are being taken care of right now. Are they getting pre-K at all, basically, to summarize what you were saying?
Thank you. Can you please pull the roll?
I'll roll.
Thank you. Representative Brannigan.
Yes.
I will vote yes as Representative Burkhart. Representative Higley.
Yes.
Representative Polka.
I'm gonna vote no, so I have the option on the floor, but I think I'll vote yes in the end. I'm just really upset because we do this over and over again.
Okay.
Representative Kimball,
Yes.
Representative Maslin.
Yep.
Representative Odie is not here. Representative Page,
Yes.
Representative Wazazak,
Yes.
Representative Canfield,
Yes.
and Representative Kornheiser.
Yes.
You have voted the bill favorable 9-1.
Thank you, everyone. We are done for the day, confusingly enough. So see you tomorrow.